Welcome everyone to Whimsy Woven Stories. Here, we explore gripping tales of real-life twists. Join our storytelling community.
Mark and Sandra stepped into the bustling restaurant, scanning the room with eager anticipation. It had been a long-awaited evening, and they were excited to finally reunite with their families for dinner. As they looked around, they spotted Paul and Lucy, Sandra's children, seated in a quiet, tucked-away booth alongside Lizzie, Mark's daughter. Assuming their spouses were simply running late, Mark and Sandra approached the table with warm smiles, completely unaware of the conversation that was about to unfold. Mark slid into the booth with practiced ease, pulling up a chair and making himself comfortable. Sandra followed, her eyes briefly sweeping across the restaurant before settling beside him, unbothered by the oddly subdued atmosphere. They settled in, ready to enjoy the evening, still oblivious to the storm ahead. "Hello, kids," Mark greeted cheerfully as he took his seat. Sandra smiled and asked casually, "Where are Jim and Sarah?" Paul answered, "We asked them to give us a little time alone with you." Sandra's smile widened. "Oh, should we be flattered you wanted to share some important news with us first?" Lizzie responded, her tone more serious than the others. "It's not exactly that. We just wanted to talk about something we've recently discovered." Mark, sensing a sudden shift in the mood, furrowed his brow. "You all sound so serious. What's going on? Is everything all right?" His eyes turned to Lizzie, who remained silent. Lucy, unfazed, turned to Sandra and said cryptically, "Pineapple fudge." Sandra froze. A lump rose in her throat and color drained from her face. She couldn't speak, only stared, stunned, trying to grasp what was happening. Mark blinked, baffled. "Pineapple fudge? What are you talking about?" Lizzie took the opportunity to press further. She looked at her father and asked pointedly, "Good question, Dad. Sandra, do you want to explain it to him?" Lucy leaned in, her voice laced with biting sarcasm. "Yes, Mom. Would you like to tell my biological father what pineapple fudge means?" Sandra sat motionless, struggling to compose herself as the weight of the moment hit her. Her voice trembled as she tried to respond. I'm waiting," she whispered. "How did you even hear about pineapple fudge?" Paul said coldly, keeping his face composed as he leaned in, his tone edged with quiet accusation. "From your diaries, of course. You write everything down, don't you? That was your little code, wasn't it? Pineapple fudge. Today I slept with a man who isn't my husband, but is considered his best friend." His eyes flicked between his mother and Mark, the indignation in his voice barely masked. The truth, heavy and raw, hung between them. Lucy, feeling the emotional weight of what had just been revealed, spoke with a mix of sorrow and bitterness. "I always wished I had an older sister." She gently squeezed Paul's hand beneath the table, then looked at Lizzie with warmth. "And I've known and loved Lizzie all my life." She reached over, squeezing Lizzie's hand softly. But then her tone shifted, warmth replaced by a biting edge. Her gaze locked onto Mark. "But it's still a little disturbing to learn we share the same biological father." The words hit like a sledgehammer, her voice laden with resentment and betrayal. The illusion of family had been shattered, trust ground into dust by the very people who were meant to protect it. Paul, his voice tight with frustration, turned to Mark. "Did you honestly think we'd never find out?" he asked. "With DNA tests, genetic markers, ancestry apps, it was only a matter of time." Mark opened his mouth, hesitated, then tried to defend himself. "Look, we're sorry. We really are. But this doesn't have to change anything. Lucy, Paul, I'm still Uncle Mark. I've always been there." But the words rang hollow. His reassurance faltered in the face of broken bonds. Mark continued, desperate to contain the fallout. "Jim and Sarah don't have to know about this. Telling them won't help anyone, it'll only cause pain." He didn't realize that the damage had already rippled far beyond control. Just then, a cold, familiar voice cut through the tension like a knife. "It's a little late for that, old friend. About 3 months too late." Mark and Sandra turned in stunned silence as Jim pulled out a chair and sat down across from them, his presence like a thunderclap. The weight of betrayal was written across his face. Sarah followed, her expression a storm of anger and disbelief. "Jim found out first," she said, her voice taut with fury. "He told me. And we decided together when to tell the kids." She sat down slowly, every movement laced with controlled rage. Her voice trembled, not from weakness but from the sheer effort of restraint. "And after the weekend I spent with Jim," she continued, eyes locked on Sandra, her voice cutting like glass, "I can confidently say your little, no-benefit argument doesn't quite hold up." She smiled then, but it wasn't kind. It was sharp, mocking. A smile that sliced through years of lies. Sandra could only stare, her world collapsing as Sarah's grin twisted with both pain and vindication. "I truly can't fathom what was running through your mind," Sarah said, her voice laced with disbelief. "Did you really trade your Michelin-starred chocolate ganache for a crusty old piece of pineapple fudge?" She scoffed, shaking her head. "I'm honestly grateful the kids insisted on more time, because I could barely walk here from the hotel." Mark's stunned expression swiftly turned to rage as realization hit. His voice cracked with a mix of shock and accusation. Wait, you and Jim? Are you two sleeping together? Lucy, despite her fury, let out a bitter laugh, the irony cutting through the tension like a knife. Are you actually upset right now? Mark, don't you think that's just a little hypocritical? Her sarcasm was thinly veiled, highlighting the double standard. Sandra, regaining her composure, raised her hands gently and spoke with calm authority. Hold on, if you two were together, then we're even. She looked at Jim squarely. You got your revenge. Her eyes met those of her husband and children, their expressions heavy with betrayal. Now we need to decide how to move forward and rebuild what's left of both our families. There was steel in her gaze now, a glimmer of resolve. Her voice gained strength. This doesn't have to change everything. Mark and I will end our affair. And you two will end yours. We can get through this. Jim's face darkened, his eyes burning with restrained fury. His voice was sharp and bitter. That would sound fair, if it weren't completely absurd. He paused, breathing through his anger before continuing. You've been sleeping with this sorry excuse for a man for 2 decades. You had a child with him and told me he was mine. Sarah and I were just friends, close yes but never inappropriate. How does that make us equal? Sandra blinked, momentarily stunned. But, Sarah just said you spent the weekend together. Sarah cut in, her tone dripping with sarcasm and satisfaction. Oh, we did. And it was magical. She grinned at Sandra, adding with playful venom, turns out not all men our age are completely hopeless. Mom? Lucy blurted out, half laughing, half mortified. Had Sandra been more emotionally grounded, she might have noticed Lucy's casual use of mom, directed at Sarah. But she missed it. The realization would come later. Jim straightened up, his voice clear and certain now. You're wrong, Sandra. There was no affair. By the time Sarah and I were intimate, both of us had already filed the divorce papers. You were too busy enjoying your little business trip to notice. He raised a hand and gestured toward the entrance. A tall, suited man stepped forward from the doorway. The atmosphere froze. Without a word wasted, the man approached the table, his voice formal and cold. Sandra Davis. Mark Willis. You've been served. He handed them each a brown manila envelope. The contents were no mystery. The man stepped back, pulled out a camera, snapped a picture to document the moment, then nodded to Jim and walked away silently, leaving Sandra and Mark stunned, their worlds shifting in real time. Silence fell across the table. Sandra and Mark exchanged bewildered glances, the envelopes heavy in their hands, symbols of the collapse they never saw coming. The chaos had just found its edge. Sandra's composure crumbled. Her voice trembled, choked by despair as tears streamed down her cheeks. I don't want a divorce, she cried. This isn't how it was supposed to happen. Mark and I, we never even liked each other. It meant nothing. I love you, Jim. I've only ever loved you. Her voice cracked with desperation as she pleaded, hoping to salvage the wreckage of their relationship. She turned to her children, Lucy and Paul, her voice breaking. Lucy, Polly, please tell your father this doesn't have to destroy our family. Her words were a prayer, cast into the void, hoping her children might mend what was unraveling. Mark sat silent, hollow, his expression a mirror of anguish. He looked utterly defeated, lost for words, as if the weight of his guilt had drained the life from him. Then, in a quiet but powerful gesture of unity, Jim, Sarah, Paul, Lucy, and Lizzie placed their hands on the table, fingers intertwining. Their united front radiated strength, an unspoken pact to face the future together, no matter how painful. Jim's voice, stern and unwavering, cut through the tension like a blade. Sandra, it's time you stopped talking and started listening. The 5 of us have been working through this for a month. Everything has been discussed. Everything is in place. And nothing, absolutely nothing, is up for renegotiation. Lizzie's voice followed, calm but resolute. We each processed this in our own way. Then we came together. We're unanimous. She looked to Paul and Lucy. The 3 of us initiated this. Our partners tried to talk us out of it, but we made our decision. Paul, mature beyond his years, nodded. My little sister may be the youngest here, but she has the clearest perspective. She was hit hardest, so we asked her to explain how things will go from here. Lucy, eyes red from crying but steady with resolve, took a breath. Her words were sharp and controlled. To put it simply, this is final. She turned to Mark, her tone turning cold. You gave me your DNA, but you were never and will never be my father. Then her eyes shifted to Sandra, hardening. You were my mother, never as good as my father was, but you were still my mother. That ends tonight. From now on, you and I are nothing. I don't want to talk, text, or hear from you. Maybe one day that will change, but I wouldn't count on it. If it ever does, it'll be on my terms. Until then, stay away. Paul looked at their broken mother and added, the same goes for me. Lizzie followed suit, her voice clear. And for me too. Sarah, with calm precision, addressed the logistics. Jim and I share a lawyer. Their contact information is in the envelopes you're holding. All communication must now go through them. A heavy silence fell over the table, the finality of their decision hanging in the air like smoke after a fire. The path forward had been chosen, and nothing could undo what had been done. After a long pause, Jim spoke again, his voice softer but no less firm. All 8 grandparents were informed today, he said. Then turning to Sandra he added, your parents, and yours too, nodding to Mark. They've done nothing wrong. We won't cut them out of the kids' lives. They'll always have a place. His words carried respect and compassion, one final act of grace amid the ashes of betrayal. Jim continued, firmly laying out the conditions. Their continued involvement depends entirely on whether they accept our boundaries. They are not to relay any messages from you to the kids, nor will they receive any updates about our lives. His tone was resolute. It was clear that these restrictions didn't apply only to Sandra and Mark, but extended to their parents as well. They may choose to keep a relationship with you, but that must not interfere with us or disrupt our family in any way, Jim said, leaving no room for negotiation. Mark, your parents are excited to meet their new granddaughter, and will support Lucy in getting to know them. As for my parents, this doesn't change a thing. They love Lucy more than anything and nothing will ever shake that. The once unified family dynamic had shifted permanently. These new boundaries would not only redefine the connection between Sandra, Mark, and their children, but would also affect the relationships between grandparents and grandchildren. Sarah stepped in, her voice cutting through the tension. We're not going anywhere. This isn't New York or LA, we'll probably bump into each other on the street or in a restaurant. Her tone was laced with anger and warning. She paused, then added with measured fury, and if that happens I suggest you both pretend you don't know me. It took everything I had not to drag you out by the ear tonight. Her rage was raw, barely contained, hinting that future encounters could be even more explosive. Then Lizzie spoke up, her tone noticeably forced but firm. In a way, Sandra, you were right. Everyone turned toward her. It was the first time she referred to her as just Sandra, not Mom, or any term of affection. That subtle change said everything. She paused, then continued with a tone that mixed strained joy and guarded excitement. I have some good news. Actually, 2 pieces of good news. She looked at Paul, then back at the table. Paul and I are getting married. And in about 7 months, your first grandchild will be here. A flicker of happiness crossed Sandra's face, brief, involuntary, but it vanished quickly beneath the weight of the earlier conversation. The same went for Mark, whose hopeful expression dimmed as the reality of their fractured connection set in. Paul, brushing aside the momentary warmth, added with a bluntness that left no room for interpretation. Lizzie and I talked a lot about how your betrayal affected us. It's crazy that we now share a half-sister. But the truth is, we were inseparable from the day we met in playgroup. That doesn't change. There was bitterness in his voice but also a strong resolve. We won't let your behavior ruin what we have. Lizzie nodded, continuing, the baby wasn't exactly planned, it came earlier than we expected, but we've always wanted a family. And now, with everything happening, it's clearer than ever that we need love and stability. Her voice was steady now, empowered by the support of Jim and Sarah. We're lucky, she said. Our 2 real parents have been by our side through everything. Their support means the world to us. Then Paul spoke again, this time with unflinching finality. Whatever you think might change in the future, don't. You will not attend our wedding. You won't be there when your grandchild is born. You won't spoil them, babysit them, or be a part of their lives. He looked directly at Sandra, a storm of emotion behind his words. You won't hear their first words, see their first steps, or catch them when they fall. He turned toward Jim, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. Mom, he said, his voice softening, his respect for Sarah undeniable. Paul turned to Sarah, using a new, meaningful form of address for the very first time. That subtle shift, calling her Mom, spoke volumes. It marked the beginning of a new chapter in their relationship. His voice softened as the weight of reality sank in. You and Dad will have to carry the role of the only grandparents now, he said gently. Despite the heavy atmosphere, Sarah couldn't hide her smile. The thought of becoming a grandmother warmed her heart, and hearing Paul call her Mom only deepened the emotion. Then Paul turned sharply to Mark. You won't be walking Lizzie down the aisle, he said firmly. That honor belongs to Dad. You lost the right the moment you betrayed our family. Jim's voice carried a firm resolve as he took over. Sarah and I didn't do anything wrong. So we won't lie or hide the reasons for our divorces from friends or acquaintances. Lucy's voice, though quiet, cut through the tension. I want people to know. I want them to understand why I cut you out of my life, Mom, so they judge you, not me. There was a raw, aching need for validation in her words. I don't want you at my graduation next month. Sure, it's public so I can't stop you from coming. But I've earned the respect of my teachers and my friends' parents. I don't want to lose that by having to spit on you in front of everyone if you show up. Lizzie, with a dry smile, added a touch of dark humor to the tense moment. Unless, of course, your mother hasn't already slapped some sense into you before then, Sandra. It wasn't just a joke, it was a warning. One last chance to listen. All five stood up, leaving Sandra and Mark behind, buried in the wreckage of the lives they shattered. Jim paused before leaving, turning to face the two who betrayed them. His voice was clear, deliberate. For 20 years, Sarah and I shared a deep friendship. It won't take much to turn that into something more. Over the last 3 months, I've already fallen in love with her, just because of the strength and kindness she's shown me. He looked directly at Sandra and Mark, unshaken. Your betrayal didn't break me, and I won't let it break Sarah either. You might have been laughing at us behind our backs for the past 20 years, but for the next 50, I'll be laughing with her. His tone softened as he turned back to Sarah. Sarah, I've fallen in love with you. I know it's early and I don't expect you to feel the same just yet, but I want you to give me a chance. His voice swelled with quiet conviction. When you're ready, I want us to commit ourselves to each other, before God and our children. Our former partners may not have honored their vows, but we will. And we'll mean every word. As Jim spoke, Sarah's tear-streaked smile said everything. She already felt what he felt. They embraced, then followed their 3 children out, unified and determined to build a new life from the ruins, one rooted in love, trust, and mutual respect. Sandra and Mark remained behind, alone in the silence, left to face the consequences of their choices. Dear listeners, what's your opinion about OP?
Thanks for listening. Share your opinion in comment section and also do like and subscribe to the channel.